Alright, so before I've mentioned that Japanese is actually a lot easier than people think it is to learn because I've been doing it for years and so have other people. But why exactly is kanji so hard for people to learn? And how can you learn it very easily? Well, I'll give you some advice. Well, before I started learning Japanese, I did it the hard way. Before, there were apps out there that you could basically just scan text and it basically could at least point you in the right direction with what you're looking at, which I would recommend doing because you can teach yourself and it actually does translate stuff. Rewording something is significantly easier than trying to find the actual meaning of a language. So if you're willing to take the time out of that, then believe me, it's much easier. But if you want to learn Japanese, what I would recommend doing is learn it in order because here's the thing: when you hit kanji, basically what you want to do is you want to learn it in the grade order because it becomes a lot easier. Like for example, grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, all the way up to I think it's grade 8 or somewhere around there. I'll have to double check. But here's the thing though. Here's the thing. If you can figure out, like, okay, so you want to write down the kanji symbol and write down the meaning behind it. And if you can figure out, like, okay, because every word is spelled a certain way. But if you can figure out, like, how to spell those words out and whether they have kanji or not, you would be surprised that even if they just had hiragana or katakana letters, they could be spelled with I think sometimes kanji might have hiragana and katakana. I have to double check. But I don't think 100% of the time, but it's really interesting to think that with kanji, once you figure out like the words themselves, because the way sentence structures work, you have to know Japanese kanji because they're borrowed letters from Chinese, but they have their own reading. They have their own Japanese reading, so you have to figure out like which is which. And what ends up happening is once you basically do the same thing with hiragana and katakana, it makes a lot more sense because now you know what you're looking at. So this becomes significantly easier for you because now you can just focus on this and you know ahead of time that you got it done. So that's always a good thing. But the thing that I would recommend doing with Japanese kanji though is just organize yourself. Keep an archive of it. Go on the internet and just, figure it out. Figure out because there's websites that have this stuff already labeled for you. Just kind of keep like a very good archive of it. File it because you very well could learn something new with it too. If you can find patterns to it as well, that also helps. Basically, the idea because here's the way I look at it: if you run into a kanji you don't know or you've never even seen before, it's better to just keep it on record because again, the more you know, the easier things become. And I really think that's the best way to just approach it because you have to know kanji at some point because not every sentence in Japanese is going to be just hiragana or katakana. You really need to know some Japanese, even Japanese citizens actually know kanji, and it's very, from what I understand, the reason why they have it is because it makes it a little bit easier in exchange for at the same time you have a lot more to learn. Here's the way I look at it: if they can do it, then so can you. And I mean, I did it too. So my gift was I was able to explore the Japanese culture even more based on my knowledge of it, and I was able to teach people it. But I want people to know that I did it the hard way, where there's a lot of kanji to memorize and maybe some readings, but once you see a lot of them, it makes a lot more sense, you know. But as long as you can just look at the words around it, you might be able to also get a better understanding of what it is, kind of fill in the blanks a little bit once you figure out the word order and all that. Verbs always go at the end, but it's always important that if you're trying to learn Japanese, that's another way to do it is by understanding that that's how the language itself is set up, is that there's a lot of singular stuff. Like it goes like subjective, object, like for example, it's subject, objective, verb. The verb always goes at the end, and I believe sometimes it can be objective, subject, verb, but usually it's subject, objective, verb. Because from what I understand in Japanese, they always want to, it's all it's always about politeness. They always want to get someone's attention first. They tell them kindly what they want and how they want to do it, and then that's basically how they start a sentence and how they end it. So it only makes sense that you mentioned like to them, like that's just it's just like an organized way of talking. But in English, it's always subject. The verb always goes in the middle, so it's subjective, subject. Yeah, it's subject, verb, objective. But it's but again, once you can figure out like where everything else fits into the whole thing, it should make sense. Because once you understand radicals and particles, right around the same time you'll learn Japanese, or even when you understand Romanji and Furigana, for example, it basically comes down to you being able to identify what the kanji is and where and when the grammar structure begins and what it's able to do. So again, once you understand all these things, it shouldn't be that much harder. It's just there's just a lot to take in, but once you have an idea of like how to identify it, knowing is half the battle, and willpower is the other half. So if you can do that, then believe me, you can learn Japanese, and there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to. Again, if you want me to teach you, I will be more than glad to sit down with you. Just send me a message, and I'll be able to help you out. There's other videos on YouTube that are probably far more useful than what I'm telling you, but these are just some of the key points that I want to mention before I really start going in depth, like how to memorize every single one of these. Because I really want people to know Japanese, even in a time where there's a lot of people that already know it. But there's still a lot of stuff that's like untranslated, and there's no way realistically that everybody's going to be able to translate all the stuff in English. So it's better just to teach the language for what it is, and then more people can just take it at their own speed, what they want to do with that knowledge.